Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Tappin with Tyler. My name is Tyler, and this is our music theory tutorial series. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about what is a note and sound versus silence. These are very fundamental when it comes to being able to read music, and you'd be surprised how many people don't fully understand the difference between a sound and silence. So let's go ahead and let's jump into it, starting with sound versus silence. So music is divided into two different things: sounds and silences. There are notes and there are rests. Not everything is going to be a sound and not everything's going to be a rest. It's the combination of the two that makes music interesting. All those really groovy beats that you hear, that's only possible because there are rests that are happening at certain times and notes are coming in at certain times, and it makes some type of feel, some type of group. These sounds and silences can have the same value and the same name. The only difference is that one is a note and one is a rest. For example, this is what's known as a whole note or a whole rest. On this side, we have a whole note. This is going to make actual sound. And then over here, we have a whole rest, which is going to make nothing. It's going to be silent. When you see this, you are going to not make any noise. And we are going to go more in depth with what exactly a whole note is or a whole rest is in terms of value. But first, let's just understand the different types of symbols. So we also have a half note. That's what this is. We have a half note, which makes a sound, and we have a half rest, which makes no sound. Now, it's very common to get these two symbols mixed up. The way I'd like to remember it is that this is a whole rest, and if this was a road right here, this would be like a little hole, and you could kind of like fall into it. This is a half note, and I just kind of think that looks like a top hat. And then we have the quarter notes. So notice that these are all kind of looking similar. This has like a little round circle. This is a round circle with the stem. The round circle is now filled in. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But this is the quarter note. Here we have sound. Here we have the rest. And this rest looks like this little weird lightning bolt, almost kind of like reverse 3 kind of thing. Okay, and now things are starting to look a little bit different. We have the eighth note. We have basically the same quarter note with a little stem on it. And the opposite of the eighth note, which is the eighth rest, is basically it just backwards and upside down. So instead of having the little flag on this side, it is now on the left side. And instead of having the little dot on the bottom, it is now on top. Or I like to think of it as like this really fancy 7 with a little dot on top. Okay. Now what's interesting is that when we get into higher notes, like here's the 16th note, it looks very similar to the 8th note, except it has 2 flags. So here is our note. This is going to make sound. And then this over here is going to be the silence. This is going to be the rest. Notice that it still carries the same 2 flags, just on the opposite side. And then we have our 32nd note, which again, carrying in our theme, we now have 3 flags on this side. And we have a nice little note head right here, and that is going to be our sounds. And then our silence has the same thing that the 8th and 16th note had, except it's going to have 3 of the little flags on the left side. Okay, so that is the sounds versus silence. It's very important for you to realize that this column right here makes noise. This is what makes noise. This side does not. This is the rests. These are the silences. So now let's kind of talk about what is a note. How do we have the composition of an actual physical note? Well, if we look right here, we have a whole note. We have this little sideways egg thing. It's white on the inside, and it represents one whole. And as you can see, I have one whole right here. Now, if I want to change this and go up to the next value, the only way I can do that is if I cut it in half. And the way I'm going to cut it in half is by adding a note stem. Now, if you see here, I've added the note stem right here, and I've also, our whole little pie that we had over here is now cut in half. Okay, so now I want to cut it in half again. I want to make it twice as short yet again. So I'm going to fill in the note head to make a quarter note. And if you look over here, we have our little pie, and it now has 4 equal parts to it. That's one of the reasons why this is called a quarter note, because it cuts up a whole note into 4 equal parts. Remember that quarter means 1/4. Okay, so now if I want to cut this in half again, I'm going to add this little flag on the side. Now this little flag is important, and we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. But what that does is make it into an eighth note, meaning that we cut our little pie from 1/4 into 1/8. So now we have our little pizza, and it's cut into 8 equal slices. Now what's interesting about when you hit eighth notes is that when you want to cut it in half again, all you do is add another flag. So you can see right here, I have a 16th note. My little pizza pie over here is now cut into 16 equal parts, and I have 2 flags right here. Notice that I never lost the stem, I never lost the note head, and the note head stays filled in. Now here's our 32nd note. We're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to add another flag, and now our little pizza over here is cut into 30 different slices. Now it's important to note that this is continuous. This note pattern is continuous. Every single time we add a flag, it's going to cut the value in half. So if we added a 4th flag here, it would actually become a 64th note, and then 128th note, and so on and so forth. Numbers go on continuously, so rhythmical values can go on continuously. Now let's look back at our sounds and silence chart. As you can see right here, we have our whole notes and our whole rest. So whole notes, whole rest. We have our half note, and we've added the stem. Here's our half note, and then here's our half rest. We have our quarter note, and now we have the stem and the note heads filled in. And then we have our quarter rest. Now these 3 rests right here, they're kind of unique. They kind of stand on their own. Remember that this is a whole note because it has a hole. You fall into the hole. This is a half note because it's a top hat. Okay, and this is the quarter rest because it's the only one that looks like a lightning bolt, weird backwards 3 type deal. Okay, and now we have our 8th note that's right here, and this is where we start adding in the flags. Here's our first flag, meaning that it's an 8th note. Our 8th rest having 1 flag on the opposite side. We have our 16th note right here having 2 flags, and our 16th rest right here having 2 flags. And then we have our 32nd note right here with 3 flags, and our 32nd rest right here with 3 flags on the opposite side. So that's it when it comes to exactly what a note is and sound versus silence. It's very important to understand that the only difference between a rest and an actual physical sound or note is that there's nothing being played. You need to think of it in terms kind of like how an artist uses a blank canvas to paint a beautiful picture. A musician uses silence as their canvas to paint beautiful music. An artist might also use blank spaces in order to enhance their picture of whatever that is that they're trying to draw or create or paint. And a musician might use blank silences in order to create something new. So think of it kind of like that. So that's it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you learned something. If you liked it, please make sure that you smash that like button. If you really enjoyed it, go ahead and subscribe so that way you don't miss future content. And I will see you in the next video. Makala Checo.